So just, I guess Saturday night, as far as the elements are concerned, that's got to be a defensive coach's dream.
Yeah, it was kind of, I mean, not to throw too much of a play on words out there, but I think it was kind of the perfect storm for us with him coming in with Taylor Kelly. You know, first game back, the elements take away a lot of the passing game. And you know, we really felt like we hadn't done a very good job the week before on the run game against Oregon. And we took a lot of time and energy into making that a priority for us, and it just so happens that's all that is available. And I thought our guys did a really good job with being disciplined with their eyes and doing their job, taking care of their responsibility, and tremendous defensive effort, you know. And so I think the difference in the game from our standpoint really comes down to three things. Was their specialists handled the elements better than ours did. We had some errant snaps and balls all over the place in the punting game, and it was the same conditions. You know, their punter and their snapper did a really good job of dealing with those elements, and I think that was one of the factors in the game. And then I think we had the opportunity to swing the game on a couple of plays in the kicking game, and unfortunately, you know, those got called back. And so you got to find a way to push through that and make another play, and that's what we needed to do. Obviously, we got the pick six from Timo, which was a huge play, huge momentum swing, but if we could have got one more of those, got a plus 50 possession, I think that could have made a tremendous difference in the game.
Do you still marveled at the way these guys can turn defense into offense?
No.
It's like record breaking. I mean, it's crazy.
Pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see those guys. You know, I think one of the things that's most impressive to me about this group is really the resilience that they have. I mean, there's no division on our sideline. You know, in a lot of situations like that where one side of the ball is struggling, you get guys that turn on each other, and our guys haven't done that. They've hung together and they've tried to pick each other up, and I think that's one of the things that's been most impressive to me. And one of the ways they're doing that is by, you know, taking it on themselves. Hey, score, get the ball back. Let's go.
Colorado's quarterback sacked only 10 times this year. What are they doing schematically, or is it just him avoiding rushes?
I think it's a little bit of both. You know, I think he's kind of a body type-wise, he's kind of like a Kevin Hogan, you know, who doesn't get sacked very often either. And part of that scheme, because it's all play-action-oriented stuff for them at Stanford, and part of it is he's a really big physical guy. And you even saw when we played Stanford, we had a lot of opportunities to get Kevin, but, you know, we bounce off of him, and he picks up a little scramble yardage, and you see that on film. With 13 from Colorado as well, and then the other piece of it is, you know, they are dialed up for a lot of quick game and scat protection where he's going to get the ball out of his hands quickly.
I think Andrew Hudson's probably producing at a higher level than maybe most fans expected. I don't know what your expectations were for him going into the year, but just what have you seen from him?
Well, it's interesting you say that because, you know, I didn't go back and watch film from 2 years ago when we got here, but we did watch film from last year, and he wasn't on that film, by and large. And so, you know, you don't really know what you have. I know that he's a guy who expressed on a number of occasions his desire to have a good experience his senior year here. And the first thing that he did was he had the best offseason of anybody in our program. If you ask Coach Saho, who was the best guy in the offseason program, without hesitation, he says Andrew Hudson. And so I think he worked himself into that position. I think he's very much bought into what we're trying to do in his role and not trying to do too much to let the game come to him. And the guy plays as hard as anybody on the field. He's got a high motor. And so he's been awesome. It's fun to see a young man who works that hard get rewarded with some success, and we're really, really happy for him and he's doing the things he's doing.
Is that a case of a senior knowing that, like, just realizing, hey, this is my last chance, for him a second chance? Really?
Yeah, I definitely think that was a part of his mindset, was that he wasn't going to be in a situation where he looked back and had regrets. And so he put everything he could into making sure that he was going to have the best senior season he could have. And I don't think his mindset was about producing and being, you know, the starter. I think his mindset was really about enjoying his experience, his teammates, leaving the University of Washington saying, yeah, I look back 20 years from now and I had a good experience. And the byproduct of his attitude being right is that he is having that kind of production on the field.
Going into the special teams, what is it? Because it sounds like Coach Pete after the game said that the wind kind of really caught you guys off guard in terms of the late forecast, and all of a sudden it just kind of literally, pun intended, but it blew in.
Yeah, well, and it was one of those nights where, you know, I mean, usually you've got a prevailing wind. There was no prevailing wind. That thing whipped all night. And so, you know, 1 minute you got a little bit of wind at your back, you're feeling like, okay, we can flip the field here, and the next minute it's in your face. And I mean, some of the snaps, you know, Corey had a tough night, but I'm just glad he caught some of the balls. I mean, you know, if you look at the end zone copy on some of those balls starting here and it's ending up over here, and at the last second, it's like, you know, it's like a hard slider. And so, you know, that was no fun, but they had to deal with it too. So that's not an excuse. And so we've got to, you know, simulate some of those conditions. That's hard to do. And just, you know, we've been through it, and now it happens again. Hopefully it's our advantage because we've been in those elements. And so it was frustrating, but they had to deal with the conditions as well.
I was going to say, but is that just something where you maybe chalk it up to chance, where maybe in their scenario the wind worked out for them, whereas for you it maybe couldn't have been more adverse?
I don't know. I mean, I try to stay away from those. Maybe that makes me sleep better at night, but I try to stay away from those things as much as I can. And, you know, we've got to control the controllables, and that's snapping the ball where it needs to be snapped, fielding it cleanly, and keeping our eyes and our head down. And so, you know, that was not good. And they were able to flip the field a couple times on us in the kicking game, and then we had some penalties that hurt us tremendously.
Speaking of that, the penalty on the Ross return, how frustrating is it getting for you? Because I've talked to a number of people. They look at it, I look at it. I'm trying to still find the penalty there.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on the officiating, but obviously it's frustrating for all of us. It's extremely frustrating, and so, you know, again, we got to control the controllables. And what my message to the players is we know we're dynamic and explosive in this phase. We just have to tighten up our we got to be perfect. We got to be perfect. That's fine. We'll be perfect. We know we got a guy that if they're kicking the ball, he'll make something happen. And so, you know, I think that's a huge one. I actually think the one on the block punt, that one was probably just as impactful. You know, because that was another 20 yards of field position, and on a night like Saturday night, 20 yards is a heck of a lot of field position. And we end up with a plus 50 possession. You get 2 first downs, and if the wind is right, maybe you got a chance to get through.
And I know you. Again, you won't comment on the penalty, but did you at least hear back from the conference?
We've turned it in, and we haven't heard what the ruling is. But I think that's an interesting one, because I think that is actually going to be. We need an interpretation on that, because we need to know how to coach our guys. Sure. You know, some of the time the blocks in the back and the holding penalties, you know, those are a little bit subjective. But you need to know what the rule is so that you can instruct your players as to how to handle those situations. And so we're looking forward to hearing back on that.
How's Durkee responded this week?
He's been good. He actually had a really good practice today. We were indoors, so that helped. And he responded well. I mean, I think that's one of the things that Corey and all of our players have to do is learn to push through those negative experiences, and you come out the other end better if you handle it correctly. And so, you know, we try to be positive with him. One thing I know, not one of those kids goes out there with the intent to screw something up. And I think that we have to understand that as coaches, and as frustrated as we may be, we still have to understand that that's not what they're not trying to go out there and make a bad play. And our job is to coach them through that, both on the emotional side and as well as the technical side.
So how rough is it for a specialist to have maybe one of the best kicking days maybe we've seen in years here when against Stanford, and now all of a sudden go through one of the roughest games you might ever experience?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I've never been a kicker or a punter, and that's one of the things that's really unique about that position. It's extremely challenging, and nobody cares unless you screw up. You know, and so those guys have to be very, very mentally tough. Kind of have to have that golfer's mentality, you know, and can't get the yips over that 2-foot putt. I mean, it's just as important as sinking 101. You know, and so that's what makes those guys unique, and the good ones are really, really valuable. And I think we've got some good guys here. I really do. I think we've got a lot of talent in that group. And I think that they're going to continue to improve. And the good news is all of them are back. And they'll get better and better and better. And I think later in this year, those guys will win a game for us.
In Colorado, for a second, just your experience with altitude. I know Pete talked about playing in Wyoming and that kind of thing. Historically, has that always been something that maybe has been a bit overblown for the sea level teams?
I think so. I mean, the only thing about Wyoming is it's going to snow every time you go there. So, you know, if you're there in August, it's going to snow. If you're there in November, it's going to snow. So, I don't think we've got snow in the forecast for Boulder on Saturday. And I think that, you know, we're in and out of there within 48 hours. I don't think your body's going to have an opportunity to be affected greatly by altitude in that short amount of time.
Especially the big